Hi, I'm Shanda Bell. I'm so excited to share a sneak peek of my newest book and my debut novel, The Rise of Nicholas the Noble. If you've ever wondered where Santa Claus comes from or what he might have been like as a boy, then this is the story for you. I'm going to read chapter 1. I can't wait to share this with you. And when we meet our pal Nicholas, things are not looking good for him. It's the kind of origin story that will really excite you, and you will love learning about this character. So I'm going to dig in, and hopefully if you love it, you'll grab a copy of the book for your very own. Chapter 1, An Unwanted Goodbye. Will I ever go home again, Nicholas thought. The handsome, brown-headed boy stood at the railing of the huge ship, with his crimson-red cloak pinned neatly around his collar. With slumped shoulders, he watched the port vanishing in the distance. The temple of Apollo grew small on the hill above the harbor. The olive groves faded into a hazy blur. There is nothing left for me there. His house had been sold along with the land it stood on, along with his mother's prized copper kitchen pots and his father's armor. Even his childhood toys were gone, his carved wooden horse, his play sword, and the green ball he used to throw into the lemon tree to knock down fruit for his mother. His parents were gone, murdered, and Nicholas was being sent to live with an aunt he'd never met. Nicholas swallowed down the lump in his throat. If there were tears on his face, he could pretend they were from the sea wind whipping across the water. He scrubbed his cream-colored sleeve past his face and shoved his fingers through his soft, curly hair. His slim, sturdy body was tight with the need to cry, but Nicholas refused to give in to it. His piercing blue eyes seemed empty. The ship heaved and swayed gently as the wind pushed it farther out to sea. It was bound for Britannia, the last merchant vessel making the trip before winter set in and the great ocean around Britannia became too dangerous to sail. A new life awaited Nicholas there. I hate this, he thought. I don't want this life. Nicholas stared blankly at the open water. The shore was gone by now, and all he could see was the vastness of the ocean, dotted here and there with seagulls, circling in the distance. A soft woof and the gentle thump of a big furry tail hitting the deck brought Nicholas back to himself. Warm breath puffed against his hand. Nicholas looked down and smiled. "Thanks, boy," he said. His giant dog, Barry, peered anxiously up at him. Nicholas crouched down and wrapped his arms around Barry's huge furry neck. He buried his face in the dog's fur. Barry shuffled closer and pressed his big warm body against Nicholas in a doggy hug. The boy and the dog stayed like that, locked together, blocking out the rest of the world until a gruff voice interrupted them. "Bread?" Nicholas peered up. It was Captain Agoda, the man charged with seeing him safely to Britannia. The captain's heavy green cloak hung evenly across his broad shoulders. He was a jolly man whose days in battle were far behind him. He held out a big wooden bowl. "Bread and stew," he said. "Eat while it's hot, boy." He paused long enough to ruffle Nicholas's hair, then moved on. He barked orders as he strode across the deck, sending ship hands scurrying. Nicholas tore into the bread. Although his belly rumbled at the rich, warm smell of the stew, he set the bowl down on the deck for Barry. The bread hadn't filled Nicholas's belly, but he didn't care. He smiled for the first time in weeks, seeing his beloved dog lick the bowl clean. He'd rather go hungry than see Barry want for anything. He's all I have left, Nicholas thought. Then he blinked in surprise when a second bowl of stew was thrust under his nose. "Just ask next time," the captain said. Nicholas nodded gratefully and wolfed down the bowl of stew. Ever since he'd turned 12, it seemed like he was always hungry. That night, Nicholas struggled to sleep below decks in his narrow cord hammock. His old homespun tunic was getting small for him, and the sleeves rode up. A cool breeze kept creeping in through the boards above his head. A chill? Odd, Nicholas thought. But it wasn't just the cold. Every time his eyes drifted shut, he woke up gasping and panicked, remembering men with swords, a V symbol on their cloaks, his mother's cries. Finally, Nicholas climbed out of the hammock and curled up in a corner of the hold with Barry. Only then, with his head pillowed against the St. Bernard's warm and furry side, was Nicholas able to fall asleep. The next morning, as the first rays of light seeped in through the narrow porthole, Nicholas woke. The bright sun and Barry's steady breath warmed him. Nicholas felt a little less hopeless. After breakfast, he took his place at the rail again, but this time he positioned himself at the front of the ship. He watched the waves disappear beneath the bow as the ship churned through the water. Barry, warm and steady, sat with him. Mid-morning, during a quiet watch, Captain Agoda joined them at the rail. "Must be good for hunting a dog that size. Bet he could take down a stag." The captain was looking down at Barry with admiration. "He could," Nicholas said, "but I don't need him for hunting. I just like him. He's my best friend. He's all I have since—" He swallowed hard, unable to go on, but he hardly needed to. The captain knew what had happened to Nicholas's parents. Probably the entire crew did too. His parents were beloved friends to many in the crew who called Lycia home, and Nicholas's father had fought alongside Captain Agoda many moons ago. Captain Agoda grunted, staring out at the water. Somehow, with this quiet man at his side and Barry pressing against his leg, Nicholas found himself talking. "Barry was the run of the litter, if you can believe it," Nicholas told the captain. "I actually got him on Christmas morning." Without thinking, he touched the small wooden cross he wore around his neck. It had been a Christmas gift, too, from his uncle. His uncle was an abbot. He was also the person who had decided that Nicholas should go live with his aunt in Britannia. "Christmas?" the captain said. He looked confused. Nicholas shook his head, remembering who he was talking to. "My family we were—" He swallowed hard and started again. "I'm a Christian," Nicholas explained. "Christmas is one of our holidays." "Ah," Agoda said. "I'm not a Christian myself, of course. I follow the gods of Rome, just like most people. But I've met a few Christians before. I had a fellow on my last crew who also followed your Jesus." Nicholas nodded. He understood how unusual it was to be a Christian. There weren't that many of them, especially not since— He shook his head and put it out of his mind as best he could. "Anyway," Nicholas said hoarsely. He cleared his throat and went on. "It was Christmas morning. My mother sent me to the market for oranges, and on my way home I heard this sound, the saddest sound you've ever heard." Nicholas went on, describing how he'd found a tiny puppy, barely able to walk, backed against a wall in an alley. A group of boys was throwing sticks and rocks at the terrified dog. Forgetting all about the errand for his mother, Nicholas waded in. "It was one of me against 6 of them," Nicholas told the captain. "And how did you do?" asked Captain Agoda. His eyes were sparkling. Nicholas could tell he was enjoying the story. "Oh, I got in a lick or two, but that's about it," Nicholas said frankly. "They beat the tar out of me. One of them got me in the chin with a brick." He pointed at the scar he still had. "Knocked me down. That's when Barry tried to protect me and went after the red-headed kid's ankle." Nicholas patted Barry's head gently. "He was so young and got a swift kick in the face for it. He wasn't bigger than a loaf of bread back then." Captain Agoda laughed, a sound that was both amused and admiring. "He was looking out for you even as a puppy, eh?" Nicholas smiled back. "He sure was. And neither of us is a quitter. I wouldn't give up. He wouldn't go away. We kept fighting, and eventually they got bored and moved on." Nicholas had arrived home, bruised and bleeding, with no oranges. Instead, he was clutching a filthy puppy with sweet eyes and paws nearly the size of his head. "Merry Christmas," he said to his shocked mother, snuggling Barry close to him. "Please, can we keep him?" His mother cleaned his scrapes and gently pressed a small jug of cold water against his bruises to cool them. But Nicholas caught her smiling a little. There was an expression of pride on her face. "Were you scared?" she asked him as she used a little resin to stick the bandage to his chin. Nicholas hung his head. "A little," he admitted. "Does that mean I'm a coward?" But his mother looked prouder still. "No," she said. She kissed his forehead. "It means you are brave. Courage means doing the right thing even when you are afraid." It was a memorable Christmas and a very happy one. Nicholas bathed Barry until his white patches glowed and snuck him scraps of the holiday dinner. He even caught his father doing the same. "My father loved Barry," Nicholas told Captain Agoda, "but I think my mother mostly just loved that I loved him." "Sir," an urgent voice exclaimed. Captain Agoda turned away to his lieutenant. "The winds are shifting," the lieutenant said. "A word, Captain." Captain Agoda clapped Nicholas on the shoulder and gave Barry a kind scratch behind the ears. Then he strode down the deck to where his lieutenant was waiting with a large sea chart unscrolled across an even larger wooden table. The two men huddled over the map together, consulting about the route to Britannia. Nicholas stayed at the rail, half listening. "We must reach Britannia before the winter storm starts," the captain said. He sounded worried. "Aye, sir, we must," replied the lieutenant, rolling up the map. "Especially since winter is when Saturn knows what wakes up in the frozen north. I hear tales of mysterious forces stirring in the northern realms. Monstrous creatures, giants, other unearthly beings." Captain Agoda scoffed. "Those tales are just superstition." "Nay, Captain, it's true," protested the lieutenant. His eyes were wide and he was waving the rolled map anxiously in the air. "I met a deckhand who sailed with a fellow who'd seen an ice giant with his own eyes one winter when his ship was blown badly off course. And there were tiny elf-like creatures and a walking snow monster and—" "Back to work," the captain said, rolling his eyes toward Nicholas, as if to warn the lieutenant not to scare the lad. The wind had indeed taken a cold turn. As time went on, Nicholas kept his post at the rail, but he was forced to accept Captain Agoda's offer of a warm cloak and a pair of thick wool socks to borrow. And Barry took to curling around his feet to keep them both warm. Standing at the rail, watching the iron-gray waves crash under the iron-gray sky day after day, Nicholas often found himself wondering about those northern monsters. The creatures the lieutenant had been describing, could they be real? Surely not. Still, the mood on the ship became more and more tense the longer the voyage went on. It seemed winter was coming early this year, and that meant that unpredictable storms were coming with it. The crew was well seasoned, but Nicholas could sense their uneasiness. Before long, Nicholas found himself clinging to the rail as a sudden cloud of snow stung his face and a mighty wind nearly tore the cloak off his shoulders. Giant waves made the boat start to roll side to side. Nicholas felt sick. "We're being blown off course," a deckhand was shouting to the captain through the gale. The next several hours were a nightmarish blur. Nicholas did his best to stay out of the way while clinging to the rail, but then the ship heaved up with such force that Nicholas was nearly thrown overboard. A sailor caught him by the arm and pulled him to safety. "Below decks for you, lad," the sailor cried over the roar of the wind, and Nicholas didn't argue. He and Barry scrambled across the icy deck and took refuge in the hold. Nicholas huddled below decks with Barry for hours. He listened to the shouts and heavy footfalls above. The men were doing their best to turn the course of the ship, but against this wintry storm, it was impossible. "It's as though something wants us blown north," Nicholas heard the captain cry. And then, crack! Nicholas was thrown hard against the side of the ship as the whole vessel jerked and shuddered. It was a sickening feeling, a feeling of wrongness as the beams groaned and splintered. Nicholas knew without seeing it. The storm was too much for the ship. It was broken and taking on water. Desperately, he scrambled up the ladder as the ship heaved around him. On the deck was pure chaos. The snow was so thick now that Nicholas couldn't see his hands when he held them out in front of him. He clung to Barry, blinking hard against the snow, and looked around wildly. Suddenly, a figure appeared through the blinding white storm. Captain Agoda. "Come, boy," he said, grabbing Nicholas and pulling him across the splintered deck. He pushed Nicholas towards the nose of the ship, roughly pulling at his cloak. Nicholas realized too late what was happening. Agoda was tying him to a wooden spar, using his own cloak. Nicholas squirmed helplessly, but his child's strength was no match for Captain Agoda's brawn. He was tied fast. Barry sprang through the snow to nip at Nicholas's bonds, but the dog could barely keep his footing as the ship bucked and groaned under them. "Nicholas," the captain said, only half visible through the snow. He squeezed the young boy's shoulder roughly. His face looked drawn. "May your Jesus protect you." Then Captain Agoda stepped back, turned towards his men, and barked out orders that were drowned out by the wind. Soon he had vanished into the swirling snow. Tied fast to the spar, Nicholas watched in helpless horror as a colossal wave emerged from the blinding snow and slammed into the splintering ship. The force of the water almost tore Nicholas loose from the pole, but the knots Agoda had made held tight. Barry scrabbled wildly to remain at Nicholas's side, his teeth clenched tightly into the fabric of Nicholas's cape. Nicholas shook his head hard as the water receded, blinking furiously to clear his eyes. The cold from the freezing ocean water was shocking, an agony of biting chill. He squirmed desperately, trying to free himself from the spar, but at that moment the ship finally reached its end. Everything went completely silent for a horrible moment. Nicholas froze and locked eyes with Barry. His ears twitched and his eyes were wide. This is it, Nicholas thought. And the ship cracked in two with a terrible groan. The nose of the ship, where Nicholas was bound tight to the spar, bucked and plunged as it tore free from the body of the vessel. "No!" Nicholas screamed. He stared in horror as the detached hull of the ship swung high in the air, capsizing backward into the ravenous waves before the ravaging wind pushed a wall of snow into Nicholas's eyes, and he lost sight of the hull altogether.